So, George, what can you tell us about this version of Klay Thompson that our Dallas Mavericks are getting, and how stunned were the Lakers that he ended up choosing the Mavs over them?
I'll start with the last question. I think they were surprised that he chose the Mavericks over them, although the Lakers had some hurdles to clear that the Mavericks were proactive about. You guys moved Timmy, right? You made two moves, actually, but one included Timmy to kind of free up some space, and that allowed the transaction for Dallas to happen more fluidly, whereas the Lakers would have had to have made LeBron take a pay cut of about 50% to make that happen and accommodate Klay, because they haven't been able to move D'Angelo Russell because there's not much of a market at the moment for him at just under $20 million. So I think that kind of helped facilitate the deal to Dallas. And I also think with Klay, I think he wants to win, and I think he's closer to that with Dallas. I mean, I was there, obviously, during the finals, and the one thing that stood out like a sore thumb was Dallas couldn't knock down a three in that series. So, and it wasn't anybody really knocking down a three in that series for the most part, outside of the one game where they won by 30 in Dallas in Game 4. So they're going to get a guy who can still shoot the hell out of the ball. I don't think there's any question about that. I think you're clearly getting a guy who's motivated, but I will temper some expectations. He's not the guy that he was even 2 seasons ago, the year after the injury, where he had a phenomenal season, particularly when you think that he came off those 2 gruesome injuries. And I want to say he had 2 of the highest scoring months of his career in that year. But he's not the guy that he was previous to the injury. Defensively, he's not the same guy anymore. I mean, he could probably guard your third best player or the third best opponent. He's no longer the two-way player he once was, where you could seek him on the other team's best offensive player. Like, those days are a bit behind him at this point.
Jorge Sedano, ESPN, with us here in the GBag Nation. Do you feel like the Mavericks are better based on the moves that they've made? Are they a better team than they were just a couple of weeks ago?
I do. I think Klay is an upgrade, and I think that, look, and I like Josh Green too, right? But, I think Klay is an upgrade over either guy. And I like the Najee Marshall addition. Sneakily kind of like it because he brings an added, layer of toughness. I don't know how much you guys have seen him play. He is a tough dude. And he, offensively, he can be a little streaky, but he's a good defender, and he can shoot a little bit. But, again, it's just the offense is streaky. I think that the Pelicans liked him. They just liked their younger guys more. And I think that kind of put him in the situation that he was in and made him available. But I like him. I don't think that, I will say this. I would say he's easily a top 8 or 9 rotation guy, in my opinion, on a good team. And I think Dallas is clearly a very good team. So I think that he can be in that mix and kind of fill some of the gaps that you lost maybe with a guy like Josh, for example.
George, you've been around some really good front office guys that have, built teams and championship teams and all that. I wanted to know, where are you with Nico? And, we were all kind of nervous with the whole, he's coming from the Nike business, shoe business and all that. We're thinking, can he really make moves? Where are you now with him? Because we're all starting to fall in love with the way that he's not falling in love with his players. He's trying to go out and make his team a lot different.
He's a beast. I don't think there's any question about it. And I, too, was wondering how that would translate. But I would say this, the thing that has translated the most is his ability to have the relationships necessary to make this all work. And by the way, it's not just the relationships to say, hey, I've known Kyrie since he was a teenager and I can bring him aboard and make it all work because I understand him in a way that few people understand him. It's also the relationships about the stuff you just mentioned, where he can be a human being and explain to guys, hey, this is a business. We loved your time here. We have to move on,
right.
Unfortunately, right? He can have those tough conversations, too. He's a relationship guy. He's always been a relationship guy. And I think that has been something that's been a huge plus for the Dallas Mavericks because he can both have the pleasant conversations and the unpleasant conversations.
Yeah, I think we were super impressed with, he said Derrick Jones Jr. was plan 1A and plan 1B. Going into the offseason. Obviously, they lose him to the Clippers. He pivots to Najee Marshall, who you just told us about. Do you think the Mavericks are still good enough defensively, even with the loss of Derrick Jones Jr.?
I think Derrick Jones Jr. is a loss. I don't know if it's like a huge loss. I think defensively it's certainly a loss because he's an excellent point of attack defender, particularly. He's so long and athletic that you can put him at the top of a zone, or you can have him guard one of the better players on the other side, particularly if it's a smaller guard and not a guy with a lot of girth, and I think he can have a lot of success. Could they find another one of those guys? Sure, but I also think they're banking on Derek Lively to get better too and really protect them defensively. And I think he's got another couple of levels, I think, Derek Lively, both on defense and offense. I think ultimately, I know people are going to look at Klay and Kyrie and Luka as a big three. I don't see it that way. And that's not a knock on Klay. I just think Derek Lively, and I told you guys when you drafted him, we had that conversation shortly thereafter that. And I talked about how I thought he was the perfect vertical threat for Luka, and defensively he's a beast and an incredible human being. Because I got to meet him last year at Summer League. I do these like time capsules at Summer League with all the guys who get drafted, and we kind of put them in the bank and use them for moments like, for example, the finals, right, where you can kind of pull some footage from that stuff about where they thought they would be in a year or 5 or 10, et cetera. And I came away blown away by him, as I mentioned to you guys a year or so ago. And I think he still has levels not only to his game on the floor, but his leadership. I mean, I was in those huddles during these finals, and he was as vocal as anyone in those huddles. I would say him and Kyrie were the two guys that were the most vocal as far as players were concerned. I think Markieff is in that conversation as well as a vocal leader type. But I think that for a guy who's a rookie to do that, I mean, that's impressive. So I believe not that I believe in big threes necessarily anymore. I think that that's kind of that's a model that's going out. I do think that he will be one of the top 3 players on the team in regards to his impact.
Yeah, he's a super beast. We love him. That's a guy that's the poster boy for like, hey, tanking can actually be good for you. That paid off in a huge way for the Mavericks. It's Jorge Sedano of ESPN with us here in the GBag Nation. What about what Oklahoma City has done here this offseason? Have they impressed you as much as anybody?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Caruso thing, it's like they stole him, in my opinion. Yeah. I was stunned. Alex Caruso is an elite-level defensive player. There is not a place on the floor that he cannot defend against another guard. Like, he is that good. And he's become a much more proficient shooter, which has allowed him, even though he's not a sharpshooter by any stretch of the imagination, he's someone you got to guard, is the way I would describe it offensively. And he's just a smart player. So I love that move. The Hartenstein move I like as well. They needed more size desperately. Because Chet, while I think he'll continue to put on more weight and more good weight, more muscle, et cetera, he did 15 pounds, I believe, from his rookie year. Well, his initial drafting to his rookie season, let's call it, that one year where he was hurt. And he'll put on more and more to get bigger and stronger, but they needed someone to help protect him. And Hartenstein was certainly a guy that blew me away at what kind of player he was. I remember the first time I saw him, it was easily like 5 or 6 years ago. I was calling the G League Showcase in Las Vegas with PJ Carlesimo on ESPN2, and he was with the Houston Rockets G League team at the time. And the knock on him back then was tons of talent, just he's got to get it, the 6 inches between his ears. And he certainly has done that. He has found a role in this league. He has worked at that role. He's a defensive guy. He's a good offensive player, moves the ball really well. It'll fit perfectly with a young group who I think will be ready to contend here very soon. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous to say that about a 1 seed, but when you think that they were the youngest team in the NBA, and they were even younger than the college version of the North Carolina Tar Heels last season, I still feel like there's a lot of room to grow there.